During tonight's debate, constitutes a false perspective. They deserve to be and have been shown up as such. Having shown them up, let us move on. The Conservatives are more than happy to help the SNP where we can. Minority government has brought better government to Scotland. Of that there can be little doubt. When the SNP has been prepared to be constructive, such as on Errol, bridge tolls, business rates, drug abuse and dealing with sex offenders, the Scottish Conservatives have been the key to the new administration delivering the right policies, changing its attitude for the better. But much of the change is only skin deep. What we're beginning to see when we strip away the SNP's self-proclaimed feel-good factor is a very tarnished crown. The brave heart attitude and bold language of the SNP in opposition is very much different from the very muted language we're hearing from the SNP in government. Thank you.
Okay, Liam McArthur for Britain.
Thank you very much. As Oliver said, I'm a graduate of Edinburgh University. I was in mind as he led me into the room here the last time I think I was in this room, certainly in this room for a political debate. I think the thing had to be drawn to a premature conclusion, and members of the Communist Party and the Socialist Worker Party had to be wrenched apart and sent to come into the room. So, like the political debate is very much, I think, in the DNA of this building and of this room in particular. Conscious of the subject of this evening's debate, I would like to perhaps spare a moment to comment on some of John's remarks in relation to broken promises. I think the big lie of the last election back in May was the notion that only a vote for the Tories is a vote for the Union. As we've seen since then on issue after issue, the Tories have backed the SNP government, which they're perfectly entitled to do. But I would, I think, slightly take exception to the notion that this somehow is a brave new dawn, at least under the previous executive, both in the first 4 years and the 4 years from 2003, when I had a programme for government that one could scrutinise, argue against, but at least it was transparent, as opposed to the grubby backroom deals in smoke-filled or unfilled rooms at the present time between Tory frontbenchers and SNP ministers. That said, in the spirit of consensus, so as we don't end up like the Socialist Worker Party and the Communists alone, I never subscribed to the what appeared to be the kind of soothsaying, according to Chicken Licken, put around largely by the Labour Party and parts of the media in the run-up to the May election, that somehow the sky was going to fall in with the SNP to be the biggest party after that election. It has to be said that this is the same philosophy and the same approach adopted by the SNP over 8 years in opposition, where the sky was constantly falling in. But I think the reality is that the SNP is made up of a number of very impressive MSPs, a number of very capable ministers. And I think what the election proves is you don't need any ministers at all for the business of government to roll steadily and inexorably on and not go crashing into the ditch. So I think what we've seen is a competent start from the government. I would certainly agree with David that it's probably premature to make any sort of rational assessment as to how well they are doing, as a number of the big issues seem to be put off at least for the next 12 months and possibly even beyond the next election. So, however, I think I would also put on record, and I don't think it's particularly controversial, that I don't believe for a second that were Scotland to become independent, we would hit the buffers either. There are many countries with far less resources, far less able to stand on their own 2 feet than Scotland. What I would contend, however, is that the union in which we are currently established has served us well, continues to serve us well, and were we not in that union, the whole debate at the moment would be how on earth we find ways of working more closely with our southern neighbours. David, I think, maybe slightly churlishly, took exception to the fact that the SNP's fundraising effort for the last election were more successful than they've been in the past. I don't have a problem necessarily with them drawing funding from the various sources. and perhaps, and this is, I think, probably something shared across the parties, who question whether or not we can keep going on spending and spending and spending without bringing the business of politics more into disrepute. However, I think what was more worrying was in their desperation to gain the levers of power, the SNP did overpromise. The manifesto was an exercise in cynicism, not across the board, but in a number of key areas. Probably speaking, the third of three opposition parties, as the previous two speakers have identified the key areas where that's the case. I think what we're seeing though since May is a progressive dumping of some of the most obvious and some of the less obvious promises that were really never achievable. Some that were achievable, but the political decision has been taken to focus resources elsewhere. Police numbers, we went from 1,000 new officers. Ken McCaskill then told us it was 500 by the end of the same day. We were down to zero. We're back up about 500 at the moment. In a sense, who knows what the right number should be. I think each party went into the election claiming the need for a different number of police officers. But I think what the whole debate has done is demonstrated that the SNP did play rather fast and loose in terms of the manifesto, and are now paying the price for that. On class sizes, likewise, I don't think there is any doubt that reducing class sizes is desirable, though I don't think it's the magic bullet. It's sometimes suggested it is, but with a declining population of young people, school rolls are going to fall anyway. And I think, again, there's been a bit of a cynical exercise in passing the buck to local authorities, but also using the demographic trend to achieve an objective, albeit partially. Grants for first-time buyers, and of course the student debt, which I think, from my own point of view, was the most colossal betrayal. It was devised sure in the knowledge that, having done the calculations, it was not going to be affordable, particularly when you now hear all the hand-wringing and hair-pulling about the lowest increase in under the Barnett formula from the Westminster government, something which all of us knew, each of the parties knew was coming for at least 12 months. What we've seen is the beginnings, I think, of a blame culture, the blaming of the UK government, the picking fights, not on every issue, but on a number of key issues, and not necessarily in the interest of standing up for Scotland. I don't think Scotland's interests are best served with having puerile disputes with Westminster, rather than seeking a means of resolving this. Very often there is common interest that can be found, and I would question whether or not it is in the interest of SNP ministers always to find that area of consensus or agreement. Blaming the electorate as well, and clearly the mandate the SNP received wasn't sufficient for them, so they say to bring forward a number of their policies, and the other parties, of course, have been blamed for not backing certain SNP policies, despite the fact that we never backed them. So this has been a minority government with, as it were, a majority ego. But to restore some of the balance, as I say, I don't think it has been all bad. I think there have been areas of consensus. Renewables is one that falls into my portfolio, and I think it is one where there's not just agreement between the Democrats and the SNP government, but also I think across the political spectrum. Certainly that was the message coming out of the debate we had on energy a couple of weeks ago. I think what sticks in the craw a little bit is the fact that in relation to the decision by the UK government to back down on nuclear in Scotland, the SNP government immediately takes credit for something that I don't think was ever likely under the previous executive, where opposition within the elements of the Labour Party and across the board in the Liberal Democrats meant it was politically unsellable. I think economically it was never a runner either. On affordable housing too,